Do you struggle to sleep at night? Perhaps it's because your partner needs something to combat their snoring problem. Are you confused about which supplements you should be taking? Do you want to find the right kind of exercise equipment for your home? Or maybe you're just looking for the best electric shaver. Which has hundreds of product reviews to keep you fit, eat well, sleep better, and everything in between. Just head to which.co.uk/health to read our expert insight and independent reviews. Get expert advice and recommendations to live your best life every day with Which.
Storms, floods and extreme weather are becoming more severe. But if damage hits your home, are you actually covered? We'll be discussing today on the Which Money podcast. Hello, I'm Lucia Ariano, and with me today I have Matthew Jenkin, Which Money journalist. Hi, Matthew.
Hello.
And another familiar voice, our insurance expert, Dean Sobers. Hi, Dean.
Hiya.
Well, thank you both so much for joining us today. Matthew, we're talking about this topic after you've recently dived into it for an investigation. What prompted you to dive into it?
Yeah, that's right. So autumn and winter, it's storm season. You'd have to be living under a rock not to notice that we've had more storms hitting the UK since October time. We've already had a few. Storm Bram was earlier this month, and that caused severe flooding in lots of places like Wales. And of course, you go back to January and you had that awful storm that I can't pronounce. Is it Storm Owen or Ewan? Okay, someone's going to tell me off. And that also brought some record-breaking winds, and there are thousands of people without power for days. It's a timely piece to look at what's going on, because the context of this is also that there were some figures from the Financial Conduct Authority that show that only 32% of storm-related claims made in 2024 actually resulted in a payout.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Because I've got here that it looks like 2025 is set to outdo 2024 in terms of how much money is actually being paid out, but then such a small percentage of claims are actually being accepted.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and it's exactly that. After a storm, that's exactly when you actually want to you're actually going to turn to your home insurance. That's when it actually becomes relevant and important. You know, it's meant to be there to help. Why are so many claims being rejected? Well, I found most of the answers lay in the small print and how providers actually define storms and floods.
And so is 32% of claims being accepted? Is that small? I mean, to me, that sounds quite shockingly small.
Yeah, it's. I think it's. You know, it sounds very low, and it is very low. So if you compare it to sort of the general, you know, if you look at all kind of home insurance claims payouts, just sort of including all types of claims, then you're looking at something like. Sort of like 2/3 to sort of 3/4, depending on the type of insurance. So then within that, yeah. But then if you're stripping out just focusing on storms, it's like 3 in 10. So yeah, compared to other types of claims, it's obviously very small. It's very low. Yeah, and you know, I mean, in terms of, I think just in terms of a sort of common sense impression, if you told somebody when they're buying an insurance product that, you know, if they got a claim, there's like there's a 1 in 3 chance that it will pay out. I think that it would give them pause for thought about the type of value for money they're getting.
Well, Matthew, you already mentioned that it's in the small print. So shall we talk about what you mean by that? Is it technicalities here?
Yeah, basically, when you have a home insurance policy, you have your terms and conditions. Now, sort of within that, there'll be all sorts of exclusions. And those are the things you need to look at, especially when you're buying a buildings policy. And we found that one of the most important things to look for if you're looking for sort of storm and flood damage, you look for the definition, look for how they define it. However, while we found that 83% of buildings policies that we analysed include a definition for storms, only a minority have one for floods. So that obviously leaves a lot of people who may live in high flood risk areas at risk. And when we looked at policies that don't have a written definition, some have applied their own definitions, but don't state those in the policy wordings. There's a lot of it is open to interpretation, while others they just default to industry standard definitions, such as those agreed by the ABI. As I said, the lack of flood definitions, that's the particularly worrying aspect. Especially when you consider recent storms where flooding has been, catastrophic for some people. And when I looked at that, our analysis found that 74% of buildings policies won't cover groundwater flooding if it happens gradually as opposed to rapidly. That's an important. That
was such a. Sorry, I got that. It just makes me so shocked when I read that. I just thought that. The speed at which the water is coming in. That
so
seems
really
ludicrous to me.
Into very sort of nitty-gritty sort of details, and there's all sorts of ways that you might think you're covered, and then discover, oh no, because they've defined a flood like this, they've defined the storm in a certain way. For example, they might include one of weather events and not the other. Wind speed is also really, really important. If it's below a certain wind speed, you might have other weather events happening at the same time, but because it's below, I believe it's 55 miles per hour, then they won't cover you for the damage. And I did speak to one case study, which we can talk about later if you like, who was affected by that particular rule.
Well, let's hear about that now. It's Stephen in Norfolk, I believe. And again, I was horrified when I heard this story.
Yeah, so Stephen, they live in a Norfolk village of Shipton, and last November they were affected by Storm Bert. And after the storm, they noticed a leak coming from their upstairs hallway. He told me, there was literally water dripping down the walls, running down the walls, which has actually happened to me recently, so I have some sympathy for him. And he thought, well, okay, I'll call, I'll get a quote. He said he was quoted £16,000 to repair the damage. When he called his insurer, however, they said he wouldn't be eligible to make a claim, even though he had the most comprehensive cover, and that was simply, as I said, because of the wind speed in the area, and said that because the wind speed was less than 55 miles per hour, that it didn't meet the criteria for a storm, and therefore they wouldn't be able to pay out for the damage, which obviously he was very upset about. However, it was quite clear in the policy documents that would be the case. So, this goes to highlight further the importance of reading your the small print before you take out a policy, because those details could be in there, and when you actually need to claim, then you could end up very disappointed.
How do you know if you're covered? Is it a case of the worst happens and then you're looking into the terms and conditions? I've got here that 83% of building policies mention storms, but obviously people aren't covered to the extent that they would hope they are.
Yeah, that's right. And there's all sorts of other small details. Some examples of exclusions that might be hidden in the small print. We found that only 1% of buildings policies will pay out for storm damage to fences, gates and hedges, which is quite surprising, considering that that is something that most likely to be damaged during a storm with high winds. And there's also lots of other caveats when it comes to the contents in the open cover, and that refers to personal movable items, ones that are deliberately left outside of your home but we're still within the boundaries of your property, such as, and we're talking about garden furniture, plant pots and barbecues, that sort of stuff. But if a storm rolls in and these items aren't properly secured, locked away, then you might find that any damage or loss won't actually be covered. And if you keep valuables outside, you can get garden cover as a policy extra, but it might not already be included. So if that's something that's important to you, then it's worth buying that as an add-on.
I like the way you phrased that earlier, Dean, of saying, from a common sense point of view. I mean, it does seem to me that these policies are falling short. And there is something called Flood Re, which is an initiative that's joint with the government. Dean, you're nodding away. Can you tell us about that?
So Floodry was set up back in 2009, I think, as a way. So before it was established, you had this problem where people that lived in areas where there was a high chance of flood risk couldn't get insurance that covered that, or if they, if any, basically insurers either wouldn't offer them cover at all or would give them really high premiums that kind of unaffordable for lots of people, or would add in like really high excesses so that if they made a claim they would have to pay a lot towards the actual claim. So it basically meant that this group of people were basically not being served at all by insurance. Now the people that were probably most likely to need it. So kind of the industry and government set up this scheme called Floodry. Basically the way that it works, Matthew kind of talks about this in his article, is that basically all insurers pay into this levy. So they all pay, they all pool this amount of money, and then insurers can sign up to become a member of Floodry. And basically what that, and then the arrangement will be that the insurer pays a small premium for a customer that they would struggle to insure because of their flood risk. And then the arrangement is then that if that customer makes a flood claim, Floodry will pay for that claim. So that takes the risk off the insurer's kind of back, and it sort of shares that risk between all the insurers, and it therefore means that insurers can cover those customers without taking on so much of a risk individually. And what that's had the effect of basically meaning that those customers who live in high flood risk areas can actually buy insurance for their needs. So that's basically what it's there for, and it's been pretty successful. One slight issue is that the scheme is only set to last until 2039, and there was kind of an idea when it was established was that by 2030 that it was a kind of a sort of a plaster, sort of it was sort of there to support the industry while a more permanent solution would be found to this issue, or that we would have kind of better established sort of flood defences in place so that the risk of flooding was kind of the insurers could kind of shoulder it by themselves again. Whether or not that's likely to be the case when this scheme dissolves in what's that, 14 years. In 14 years, I think that's up for debate, really.
So I suppose we'll have to wait and see there. But I guess there is a silver lining in the sense that at least hopefully people can get flood and storm cover if they want to. But there does still seem to remain a problem around the technicalities and whether they're clear enough when people take out the cover so that they actually know if they're getting the level that they want. Is that fair to say, Matthew?
Yes, I think it is. I mean, we did some research earlier this year into sort of flood and storm definitions, and we found that 20% contained a definition of storm that we believe is potentially unfair, and that means if they stipulate a single type of weather event must be involved or excludes others. For example, over half of the policies we analysed only cover damage where high winds were involved. We've mentioned that. And that means a claim for damage caused by hail, snow or torrential rain could be rejected. And when it comes to floods, it's a similar story. As I mentioned already, often there's no mention of a flood. There's no flood definition at all in the policy, and that can leave things very much sort of open to interpretation. Dean, did you want to add anything to that? Or
no, I think that's fair. So I think it's kind of a twofold thing, isn't it? So on the one hand, there are lots of policies out there that will have these kind of sort of weird stipulations about what's a covered event and what isn't. So for example, when I think commonly when someone takes out a policy that they think covers them for storm, and then if they're if their home's damaged by, let's say, sort of heavy rain or like a blizzard or something like that, and they call their insurer and their insurer says, well, how fast was the wind? And they said, well, it wasn't the wind that caused the damage. But then it's, well, if there wasn't high wind, it's not a storm. Therefore, this hailstorm that damaged your roof or whatever it might be isn't valid. So yeah, we think that's those sorts of stipulations are unfair. But then also behind that, you've got lots of vague definitions and kind of unclear terms and conditions, which mean that it's very difficult, especially when you're buying the policy and kind of thinking hypothetically about what might happen, to actually understand how extensively the policy would cover you.
I mean, this might be a hard question to answer that I'm about to ask, but I suppose for any of our listeners then who are wondering, well, is my cover good enough? Or I'd like to take out cover, where on earth do I start? What advice would you give there?
So yeah, you're right. It's a difficult question because the usual sort of thing that I would say when asked a question like this is check the terms and conditions very carefully. And I obviously still think this is a very important thing to do. So so for example, a place you can start is by trying to find out what the definitions of certain words are. So in lots of policy wordings, for example, if there's a word that has a special meaning, it will be in bold. So like if it's storm, it will be in bold, and then there'll be a like a jargon buster section or a definition section of the policy wording where I'll explain exactly what the insurer understands by that word. So it should set out, so for storm it will set out. A storm is like a weather event that involves high winds or hail or or rain or whatever it might be. So it's useful to kind of check those things just to see that you have a similar understanding of those sorts of things that the insurer does, that you're on the same page. That being said, lots of policy wordings, as Matthew's just been talking about, aren't really that helpful in kind of setting out the insurer's understanding. And we think this is something that the industry really needs to kind of get to grips with. But kind of in the meantime, the best thing you can really do is contact the insurer if you have if you're unclear about any aspect of the policy, and get them to explain it to you. Obviously, what you can also do is you can go to our website and kind of check out our reviews and our guides, where we kind of do our best to kind of explain some of this, and we factor some of this into how we review policies.
This is slightly different to your policy, but you did give some really useful tips, I think, in the article on how you can protect your home, which is kind of related. It's a bit of a side note. Can you run through those? Yeah,
I mean, if you live, for example, in a flood-prone area, one of the first things you should do before you take measures to actually protect your home is consider to sign up for government flood alerts. And then practical measures you can take include installing specialist flood doors and air brick covers to prevent water entering your home. You could also consider permeable materials, using permeable materials such as gravel, block paving instead of concrete in your front garden. Those types of materials, they allow rainwater to soak through to the soil below, so you're less likely to have the water entering your home. There's other simple steps you can take. For example, check out your drains and your gutters, clear them regularly. I've been doing that this week, just because every time it rains, the water just spills over onto our walls and causes damp. We have all sorts of damp problems. So, not to bring myself, I'm not affected by this. In we haven't been flooded, but it affects everyone basically. So yeah, just regularly maintain your home. Look at the gutters, make sure they're cleared. Also take a look at your roof too. Make sure there aren't any loose tiles that could fall. And then another one you might not have thought of doing is to prune your trees. If you've got trees, pay attention to any trees near your property, as well as the ones within your garden if you have a garden. And if the tree isn't on your land, contact the owner or the council and ask them to look after them. And then small adjustments. You can place sockets higher up on the wall. You might not have thought of doing that. You could even put, if you know that your property does get flooded, if you're expecting a flood, you could even put wellies on your table legs. That was chair legs in wellies. It sounds ridiculous, but it will.
Interesting one. I mean, just sounds like it would do the job, I suppose. If
Yeah,
you're really
if
desperate.
you know that you're going to be flooded. I mean, some people do live in areas where it's just a heavy deluge means you're going to get flooded, and move any valuables as well. Anything that's sort of a sentimental value out of harm's way, basically, because those are the things that you really can't replace.
That maintenance point is a really important one, I think, because an exclusion which is pretty much ubiquitous in all home insurance is about wear and tear. So, for example, if you had like a loose tile on your roof, and heavy wind blew off the tile, and you phoned your insurer, one of the things that the insurer will be looking for will be, well, was that tile, did like violent weather basically damage the house, or did violent weather just basically expose the fact that the house wasn't properly maintained? Therefore, it's wear and tear damage, and therefore we don't cover it. So yeah, that kind of maintenance thing, that's wear and tear side of things is. Can't say this like for sure, but I suspect it's going to be behind a lot of these claims rejections that happen, where the insurer is arguing that if the house had been maintained properly, then the weather wouldn't have caused the damage it did.
I suppose one of the issues, though, is that you might not realise that you have damage until a storm happens. Because how many people go up on their roof?
Inspect their roofs every other month.
Let me say, and you might not actually know if there's I don't know. It could be the seal. Some of the seal of the roof is faulty or is basically damaged.
Things happening under the floor.
That's right. There's all sorts of things that you just wouldn't realise until it actually happens. So.
Yeah.
But what you can make some simple checks, I guess. But there's only so much you can do.
Well, thank you both very much. That was a really important note to end on there. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas.
That's all from us for today. As this episode goes out just before Christmas, I just want to say a huge thank you for listening throughout the year and wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a happy, healthy new year. And just a quick side note, after over 6 years. After over 6 years hosting the Which Money podcast, I'm heading off on a 12-month sabbatical from January. So I'll be back with you from 2027. But don't worry, the Which Money podcast will be in very safe hands with our producer, James. So thank you again for listening. Take care, and we'll see you on the other side of the year. Thanks for listening to this podcast from Which, the UK's consumer champion. You can find plenty more advice about what we discussed today in the show notes. There you'll also find a link to become a Which member for 50% off the usual price, an offer exclusively available to you, our podcast listeners. Joining Which will not only give you access to our product reviews, our app, one-to-one personalised buying advice, and every issue of Which magazine across the year, but you'll also be helping us to make life simpler, fairer and safer for everyone. Don't forget to hit subscribe wherever you're listening. That way you'll be notified whenever we release a new episode of Which Money, Which Shorts, or any other podcast that we make for you. And if you want to get in touch with us, then follow us on social media at Which UK or drop us an email to podcast@which.co.uk. See you next time.
If you're enjoying this podcast from us here at Which, then why not become a Which member? Right now, we've got a special offer, especially for podcast listeners, meaning you can choose any of our 3 membership tiers for 50% off the usual price. Starting at just £39.50 for a full year, you can get Which magazine delivered direct to your door. For the same price, you could also choose a digital Which subscription, giving you access to all of our product reviews, the Which app, and the digital edition of Which magazine. What's more, you'll also be able to use the Ask Which service for personalised one-to-one buying advice. Or why not get a full access Which subscription for just £49.50 for a full year? Don't forget, that's 50% off the usual price. To join Which or to find out more, just head to which.co.uk/podcast offer. That's which.co.uk/podcast offer, or click the link in the description for today's podcast for 50% off a Which annual subscription.